Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Mastermind education session on sleep hygiene. My name is Hannah Jenkins, and I'm a Primary Care Improvement Officer that works out of the Newcastle office. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting and joining from today, and pay respect to elders past, present, and the future. I'm sure we can all agree that our sleep has been pretty disrupted over the past 18 months. You know, everyone has been affected by recent events, whether it's the bushfires, the floods, the pandemic, or most recently the mouse plague. I think this webinar has come at a really great time, and I look forward to learning about how I can improve my sleep. So to do that, we're joined by Matthew Milne from the Rural Adversity Mental Health Coordinator from the Rural Adversity Mental Health Program. Matthew is a mental health coordinator working for the Rural Adversity Mental Health Program in the Hunter region of New South Wales. He graduated from the University of Newcastle in 2002 with a Bachelor of Psychology, whereupon he relocated to Tamworth from Newcastle. Matthew completed his internship working as a rural psychologist, providing psychological interventions both in the office and on the road. Matthew has travelled far and wide across the New England Northwest, providing rural towns and communities with psychological services that they would not have been able to access otherwise. Matthew continues his work in rural communities by providing mental health support, training and information, as well as connecting people in need to services that are both appropriate and local to them. On his days off, Matthew can be found bushwalking, gardening or volunteering for his local RFS brigade. Following Matt's presentation, Sandra from the Health Pathways team will present the new insomnia pathway that just became available yesterday. And before I pass it over to Matt, I'll have some housekeeping information. Please keep yourself on mute. If you want to ask a question, please put it in the chat pane. Matt will answer a few questions after his presentation. We also have a short survey at the end of the presentation that we encourage you to complete. But for now, I will pass you over to Matt. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to just figure out how I can get this going. Excellent. Are we looking good?
All good.
Great, thank you. So I am Matthew from the Rural Adversity Mental Health Program, and I'm going to be talking about sleep today, as well as a little bit of information about mindfulness at the end, because I think the two tie nicely together. I'm probably the worst person to be talking about sleep at the moment because I have a newborn child who has reached that 4-month sleep regression phase. So I don't quite know what sleep is anymore or understand how to do it. But today I'll be running through this presentation anyway. We're going to be talking briefly about what sleep is and what happens when we sleep and the different changes that are occurring during our body, within our body during sleep. We'll talk about things that affect sleep and then lead into sleep hygiene, as well as sleep techniques if we're having trouble going to sleep or we have patients or clients that are having trouble with sleep. There's a few things that people can sort of set themselves up for success with before any other deeper investigations need to happen. And then, as I mentioned at the end, we'll talk a bit about mindfulness. And hopefully I'll come in under my 30-minute time limit. So talking about sleep, sleep is tricky to define, but it's something that we do every day. It's marked by a distinct period of inactivity where our body enters a type of recovery phase. There's actually a lot of activity that happens when we sleep, but we largely understand it as this period of unconsciousness. Sleep is regulated by our 24-hour circadian rhythm, which is also known as our body clock, which senses the light and dark periods in the day and will stimulate us accordingly. So if it's light outside, certain hormones and chemicals are being produced in our body that keep us awake. And then when the sun goes down, different chemicals start trying to put us to sleep. Now, our body enters this recovery phase during sleep as a process to repair and largely thought to remove toxins from our brain and our body and keep us well. But it also helps us create new pathways. It fortifies memories and experiences that we've had, and also has a little bit of a role to play in learning, and the patterns and things that we do throughout the day are solidified at night, and we get better at it the next day. And I think this is a bit of a no-brainer, but sleep is just as essential as oxygen, water, and food. If we don't go without sleep, it can create a few problems for us, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I thought I'd just run through a few of the physical components that are required for sleep, or things that happen to control sleep, and then a few of the chemicals that are involved in sleep as well. So all of these parts of the brain play little roles with the sleep process. They each work together to either put us to sleep or keep us asleep and wake us up in the morning as well. Some produce hormones that create sleep, and others just turn things on and off. So the hypothalamus is the part in our brain that receives light input from our eyes. It tells us whether we need to be awake or asleep depending on what the sun's doing, and is also involved in regulating that circadian rhythm. Our brainstem, it communicates with the hypothalamus and controls the transition between wake and sleep. It's the part of the brain that tells the other parts of the brain to start producing certain chemicals that we need to be able to go to sleep, and it's also involved in the bit that creates that paralysis effect when we go into different stages of sleep, which we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. The thalamus, it turns on and off and plays the roles in dream formation, and I will talk about dreams. I have dedicated a slide to that. It is quiet for most of the sleep process, but does serve to disconnect us from the outside world. It becomes quite active during the REM sleep phase and is also part of the stimulus for our dreams. The pineal gland, which is located quite deep in the brain, it produces melatonin, which is our primary sleep hormone. Again, it plays its role in the circadian rhythm, and it also responds to the light exposure in the daytime, but can be disrupted by blue light from our devices, which we've now quite discovered that blue light affects our sleep, and we'll talk about that when it comes to sleep techniques and sleep hygiene. The amygdala is active during our REM sleep. It's also thought to have a role in dreams. And then parts of our forebrain release adenosine, which supports sleep. It's another sleep hormone, but it is the hormone that's mostly affected by caffeine. So if we're drinking caffeine after sort of 3 p.m, 5 p.m, it's going to interrupt our ability to produce adenosine and will create issues for sleep. So what happens when we sleep? We have two sleep cycles or sleep stages. That's either non-REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. And we transition through those stages a number of times during sleep. Each time we go through one of those stages of sleep, we do something a little bit different in our body, but I'll cover the basics here. It's worth noting that sleep is actually a very complex process of the body, and there are parts that are very well understood about sleep and other parts that we have some good guesstimations about what happens during sleep, but and then there are probably some parts of sleep that are yet to be studied or are unknown. So what I've done in this presentation is given an overview of the main components of sleep, but if people are looking for some more information, there's some very good information coming up at the end of my presentation. So the stage one part of sleep is non-REM sleep. It's the transition from wake to sleep. Basically what happens is all of our daytime functions are suspended, and the things that keep us awake during the day, and our brain starts to wind down and switch from daytime to nighttime mode. We'll have things like our heart rate, our breathing, and our movements will slow down. And basically by this stage, we've felt tired, we've gone to bed, we're laying in bed, and we're beginning to fall asleep. And this is the transition. This transition is quite short, and then stage two is a bit longer. This is when stage two is the transition from light to deep sleep. We're continuing to slow down, but everything's noticeably different from stage one. Basically, our body temperatures drop to the lowest that it'll be throughout the night. Our brain has almost completely switched off. All of our bodily functions have gone to their lowest rate or their slowest, like our heart rate's the slowest that it'll be, our breathing rate's the slowest it'll be, and we're in quite a deep sleep at this stage, still in non-REM sleep. Stage 3 of sleep, also non-REM. This is our deep sleep cycle. Everything's at its lowest and slowest. It's the most restorative sleep that we'll experience through the day. And it's also the period of time that if you try to wake a person up, it's going to be quite difficult to wake that person up. This is the repair and restore component of sleep, and it's also known as delta sleep. This is when our body is working very hard at repairing and patching up and cleansing and all those things that happen during sleep. Then stage 4, this is REM sleep. It occurs about 90 minutes after we get to sleep. It can last for a period between 90 and 120 minutes. And during this time, it's distinguished with periods of really high brain activity. We're going to see a lot of eye movement, and it's called rapid eye movement sleep, and that's what's happening most of the time. Everything is basically in a state of paralysis except for our eyes. Our brain's going full tilt, and so are our eyes. We cycle between stages 2, 3, and 4, so the light sleep, the deep sleep, and the REM sleep, and they gradually increase in lengths of time of REM sleep as we get closer to the morning. We're going to see a lot of dreaming happening during this time, and those dreams get longer. And it's probably a reason why we seem to be able to remember our dreams that we have closer to when we wake up in the morning rather than dreams that we have overnight. We need a combination of the light sleep, the deep sleep, and the REM sleep to be able to consolidate the memories that we've taken from the day before that, make those pathways, form those new pathways, and execute a full sleep process before the morning comes. If we're having broken sleep, like I'm experiencing at the moment, or we're working shift works and we're not getting that right sleep, and with the matching up with our the light and dark periods outside, we're going to be having some problems with the quality of sleep that we're getting, and that's why we're going to be talking about how to fix that up. Throughout the night, as we're cycling through, stage 2, 3, and 4, light sleep, dark sleep, light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, and as the sun rises, our circadian rhythm starts switching back to that wakeful period. Our melatonin production is going to stop, and we're going to move out of REM sleep, and the deep sleep will return to a light sleep stage. And eventually we're going to wake as the sunlight starts to take effect on our body. Even if we're sleeping in a dark room, the circadian rhythm still keeps that 24-hour cycle ticking over. There were a few experiments done where people were put in completely dark rooms and they were left there for a period of days, and they still seem to wake up and sleep for the same amount of time through a 24-hour period. And that is just our body clock at work. So the sunlight, we do know, affects that, but it's not necessarily something that we have to have to get a good sleep and have our body clock working. As the sun comes up, all of our bodily functions start to come back online, and we have new hormones kicking in which start to wake us up and make us feel fresh in the next morning, and we're ready to go for the rest of the day. So there are a number of things that affect sleep, and I'm going to talk about some of the main ones here. This is not an exhaustive list, and there are going to be things that affect some people more than others, and there's going to be things that affect people completely, and the same thing doesn't affect someone else. But mainly the sleep environment is one of the major factors that ensure that we can fall asleep and stay asleep, and I'm going to talk mostly about that next when we talk about sleep hygiene. Stress can impact sleep by having our bodies produce cortisol and adrenaline. These two chemicals can overpower the chemicals that we make to fall asleep, the melatonin and adenosine. And while we eventually might become sleepy enough to go to sleep, the sleep that we have never transitions into that deep and REM sleep. So we wake up and it's not restorative sleep. We're sleeping shorter blocks and we're just not feeling refreshed the next day, and that's caused by stress and the impact that has on our body. Some medications and have side effects that can have similar effects on our sleep and result in poor sleep or inability to initiate sleep and fall asleep or stay asleep. And our diet can also impact and interfere with this as well. Diets that are high in calories, high in fat and sugar, that can have us up digesting at hours of the day when we should be asleep. Alcohol is also a common thing in people's diets, and it's a substance that's commonly associated with sleep. A lot of people will use alcohol to help them get to sleep, and that works because it's a depressant on our bodies. It slows all of those processes down and can help us get to sleep, but it actually results in poor sleep and leaves us feeling worse off in the morning. I've found that a lot of people do use alcohol to help them try to fix their sleep or get their sleep back happening, back into a reasonable pattern, particularly when they're experiencing stress. But a lot of the time we're creating a much bigger problem because people are then becoming dependent on alcohol for sleep. They're not resolving the thing that might be causing the sleep problem, which is stress, and then it just becomes a compounding problem, and we're still not getting any better sleep. Some medical conditions can be associated with sleep disorders like insomnia or different parasomnias like nightmares, sleepwalking or night terrors. These are things that throw out or there could be things that throw out our circadian rhythm like jet lag or working shift work or night shift. Things like narcolepsy or restless leg syndrome that wakes us up really early in the morning. Things like snoring and sleep apnea can impact the quality of sleep that we have and the time that we spend in different sleep stages. And if people are experiencing a medical condition, sometimes the sleep hygiene stuff, even though you're doing the absolute best that you can be doing, is not enough, and that's when it's worth talking to a doctor. Hopefully before, if we realise that we're having some bad sleep, talking to a GP can really get ahead of that problem before it becomes too much of a problem. Different types of lifestyles. I mentioned shift work before. It can disrupt our circadian rhythm, especially if you're working night shift or you're going to bed when the sun's up. If we're going against our natural impulses to sleep, like knocking off work at 5 a.m. as the sun's coming up and trying to get to sleep at that time, it's going to be a big ask for our body. It's something that we can get better at. We can definitely try and set up our sleep environment for success by making it dark and quiet. But really, we're going against our circadian rhythm, and the thing that's trying to put us to sleep or keep us awake at that time, it's going to be a very tough thing to do for a very long time. Things like pulling all-nighters to study or work or binging something on a season on Netflix. This is just as bad as working shift work, and if we're going against those natural impulses to sleep, we're setting ourselves up for failure. I did have someone tell me as well, don't ever stay up for something that you wouldn't wake up early for. It's just not worth it. And finally, there's quite an emerging body of evidence that suggests that or confirms that devices and being attached to them 24/7 is bad for us. The blue light that's emitted from those devices, which we hold very close to our face and our eyes, it's quite similar to the color of the sun in the daylight, and it's going to stop the production of melatonin, and that's going to impact our sleep initiation. So the general rule of thumb is to try and have at least an hour of device-free time before we go to bed. And I'd love to say I was really good at that, but I'm not. I'm generally still on my phone while I'm in bed, and that's really bad in terms of from a sleep hygiene perspective. But if we're having trouble falling asleep, this is probably one of the first things that we can do to restrict our use of devices before bedtime to make sure that we're going to set ourselves up for really good sleep after that. So what happens if we don't sleep? There's a reason that sleep deprivation is used as a torture method, because it's quite an effective way to string someone out and have them start to lose the plot. If we're not sleeping, we're basically torturing ourselves. We're not going to give our body that time that it needs to repair and restore, and it can really impact our mind and our body in a number of different ways. Again, I've touched on the main ones here in this presentation. But basically, there's many things that occur physically at a cellular level that result from us not having the time to repair our bodies and can lead to chronic and serious health conditions. And these things are more likely to be the result of regularly not getting sleep, like shift workers. So it's important that we do think about the way that we manage sleep. And a lot of there's these chronic conditions or health conditions are things like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, anxiety, and depression. The risk factor for all these things starts to increase if we're not experiencing good restful sleep. But more commonly, a bad night's sleep is going to leave us feeling like we're not on the top of our game, and it may look like fatigue, this difficulty with attention, concentration, and memory, impaired performance at work, being irritable or having trouble with our mood, maybe feeling more anxious than usual, having decreased energy and motivation, and also increasing our risk of errors and accidents, which has quite a large workplace risk that comes along with it. So yeah, sleep is quite important to all aspects of our life, and I really wish I could be getting more sleep at the moment. So what about dreams? A lot of people, I thought, would be wondering about this since it is quite a well-known component of sleep. But the long and the short of it is that science is kind of still undecided on what the purpose of dreams are, but there are a few popular theories, and I'll just run through a few of the main ones. So Freud published his book, The Interpretation of Dreams, in 1900. And his theory was that dreams were that there was a type of excess energy that after the day, that if we went to bed and we hadn't used all of the energy that we had left, we had a bit of an energy conflict. And so that was resolved by our nerves in our brain using that energy by firing, and that created and formed dreams. And that dreams relied on the daytime stimuli, the things that we did through the day. And as such, the dreams were considered to be an unconscious interpretation of the daytime state that we moved through. Freud was quite a character, and he contributed a lot to psychology, but he did have some pretty out there thoughts about dreams and many other things. I'll just leave it at that. In the 40s and 50s, dreams were thought to be about the reorganization of memories throughout the day and had no specific meaning at all. It was as if our brain was sort of inspecting each experience that we had through the day or memory, and then filing that experience during our sleep. So it was sort of, imagine a big pile of paper on the side of the desk beside you, and your brain's going through looking at each one and finding where it needs to go in the filing cabinet and putting it away. In the 60s and 70s, scientists thought dreams were more about the result of the brainstem sending electrical impulses to the visual cortex, which resulted in random pieces of information and memories being displayed, again with no sort of meaning attached to it. The brain then took these bits and pieces of visual information and tries to stitch them together into some sort of narrative or story, and that was a dream. The current thoughts about dreams suggest that it's a combination of both this neurotransmitter stimulation or activity and also the processing of events and emotions throughout the day. So a little bit of both. The thing about dreams is that their meanings have quite a bit of cultural and spiritual influence on them. We do know that we dream for about 2 hours a night, and they mostly happen during REM sleep, and we're more likely to remember dreams that occur closer to our wake-up period. Some people, interestingly, only dream in black and white, whereas other people dream in colours. And if you were interested in learning a bit more about your dreams or being able to interpret them or take meaning from them, it could be worth keeping a bit of a dream diary. And some people find that there's a process through that where you can become quite lucid in your dreams and be able to control dreams, but I don't know a lot of information about that. So sleep hygiene, this is the types of things that we can do to set ourselves up for optimal sleep. This is the perfect world stuff where we're going to be putting our best foot forward when it comes to having sleep, and hopefully we'll be getting proper restful sleep every single night, all of the time, and being perfect in the morning when we wake up. What I like to consider this to be is more of a good guideline for good sleep, and take whatever you can from this and try to implement it into your own sleep schedule or sleep process, and you'll be doing the best that you can to set yourself up for good sleep. So the basics are: have a sleep schedule and wake up time, and part of that sleep schedule means having a routine in which you say get home from work, spend some time watching TV, you cook dinner, you have dinner, you then have a wind down period, you might have a shower or a bath, then you brush your teeth, and then you get in bed and read a book and then turn the light out and then go to sleep. The more consistent you become in this routine before bed, the more your body begins to recognize the signs that sleep is imminent and starts to ramp up things like the production of melatonin. Also, for our own personal benefit, having a good routine around sleep means that we can keep our day on track and we can allocate time for different things rather than cooking dinner at 8 or 9 o'clock and then eating that and then trying to go to bed with a full tummy. We're going to be spending a lot of time trying to digest food rather than focus on sleep. Being active throughout the day and incorporating exercise into our routine, another important component of sleep. If we're physically tired when we're going to bed, our body shuts down a lot quicker and we can be feeling more rested. Basically, if we're knackered when we go to bed, lights will go out pretty quick and we'll be asleep and have good sleep then. I talked about diet being an important component of sleep. So eating well, eating a balanced diet, one that's not heavy on fats, sugars, carbohydrates, those sorts of things, they're going to keep us up at night. But if we eat a really nice balanced diet, that's going to help nourish our body into our exercise. Our body will be using that energy source, and then we'll be recharging overnight, and we'll be feeling nice and fresh for the next morning. I talked about devices and how that can interrupt our hormone or chemical production of melatonin and adenosine. It really is one of the big impacts that we can make to our sleep process is ditching the devices early in the night. General rule of thumb is about 3 hours of device-free time before bed, but I know that that's certainly not always achievable for me because a lot of the time I'm either video calling or I'm doing work or stuff like that, often in a dark room with the bright light right in front of me. Not a great I'm definitely not practicing what I preach here, but I can at least tell you what everyone says that we should be doing, and that's having some device-free time before bed. And then finally, setting our bedroom up for an optimal sleep condition. So we want a bedroom that's quiet, a bedroom that's dark, that's the right temperature, and then that's clutter-free. Generally, we also look for, I forgot to add this point here, is that our bed also needs to be comfortable as well. We need to have fresh sheets, needs to be nice and comfy in our bed, and part of that means having the right bedclothes or stuff that we need to maintain the right temperature throughout the night. So the temps are cooling off. Make sure that we've got a blanket and a doona if that's something that we need. If we know that we're a bit of a cold frog and we might need a little bit of extra stuff to keep us warm throughout the night. As our body temperature drops when we're going through our sleep cycle, we need those extra blankets and things to keep us warm. Things like quiet and dark. Some people like to wear like an eye mask or earplugs. I find those to be too restrictive, so I have block-out curtains and then normal curtains. And I can deal with noise to go to sleep. I just cannot deal with light. So even if there's something with a tiny little dot of light, like a TV, if there was a TV with the little standby light, I'd have to put a bit of blue tack on it. I'm hopeless when it comes to light. I love my dark room. But there we go. They're the main features of sleep hygiene. If you go to Google and type in sleep hygiene, they're pretty much all the same. You can get a nice little printout of things that you can go to and do a bit of an audit of your routine through the day and how you go to sleep, and you might be able to make some improvements. Now, I'll talk about sleep techniques. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in that if we're having trouble consistently getting to sleep, it's probably worth talking to our doctor having a visit to your GP to have a chat. It'd be important to catch up on or to pick up on a medical condition that's impacting sleep. Even though we try these things at the same time, the sooner you catch medical conditions that affect sleep, the less impact it's going to have on your body and your mind, for that to add that in as well. So it is important, if we're having consistent poor nights of sleep, we're feeling ragged and not refreshed in the morning, and that's been going for a period of time, let's try and get into a doctor. Let's try and investigate what's going on. But with that said, there are a few sleep techniques that we can use to try and help ourselves get to sleep. Now, I'm going to be assuming here that we're practicing good sleep hygiene, that we're not, looking on at our phone while we're in bed, where we've got our device-free time, we've got our wind-down routine, all of our bedrooms set up nicely for sleep, and we're still having trouble with sleep. There's a few things that we can be doing to try to improve sleep. We can try relaxation exercises. This could be something like, I've mentioned it there, progressive muscle relaxation, but before bed, you could do some relaxation exercises like yoga, to do a bit of a stretch, just get the body, a bit of blood flow moving around the body, and then getting in bed and then slowing down from there. Breathing exercises like square breathing or belly breathing are quite effective when it comes to getting to sleep, because it involves focusing on breath only, and blocking out those things around us. And to do that, it's quite simple. Square breathing is taking in a breath for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds, and then repeating that cycle again. Belly breathing is quite similar, but it focuses on using the diaphragm for breathing. So laying there in bed with your hands on your tummy, breathing in nice and deep so that the tummy goes up. We know that we're getting an entire breath of air. We're using our diaphragm to breathe in. It's also called diaphragmatic breathing. And then breathing out slowly, and repeating that process in a square breathing format. It's going to start engaging some of those relaxing and slowing down mechanisms in our body, and then our natural process can take over from there. Other things like body scanning, where we're laying in bed, going through our body, focusing intently on all the different features of our body, moving from our toes to the tip of our head, and looking at what are the sensations that we're feeling in my toes. Can I feel the blankets on my knees? Can I feel my tummy going up and down? That's body scanning. And it's also part of mindfulness. It's a component of mindfulness, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the coming slides. Progressive muscle relaxation is quite the same, but it looks through all of the different muscle groups that we've got in our body, starting at our toes, working our way to our head, becoming aware of where we are holding tension, by tensing each muscle and then relaxing and letting that muscle just go back to its fully relaxed state. And we work slowly up the body, and hopefully by the time we make our way to our head, combined with some slow breathing, we'll be very tired by that stage, and be ready for some sleep. Some people find that journaling before bedtime, often one of the things that keeps us up at night is stress or anxieties or things that we need to try and remember for work the next day. Making a commitment to ourselves that we'll write it down in a book that we keep beside our bed, and then picking that up the next morning so we can remember what those things are, can be a really good way to help us get to sleep. So if we've got a lot on our mind and we're trying to go to sleep and we're trying to remember those things for the morning, we're going to be operating at a certain level of stress, which we know impacts the quality of sleep that we have. So by knowing that we've written down what we need to remember for the next day, or the things that we need to do, and parking that on our bedside table, we know that we can just go to sleep without having to worry about anything, and we can, again, get sleepy and have quality sleep. And I'm pairing that suggestion up with a sleep diary as well. I talked about a dream diary before. A sleep diary is a way to map the amount of sleep that we've had, and we can then learn what our natural patterns are for sleep. So if we're waking up at a certain time, We jot that down in our sleep diary, and it informs a bigger picture of how we sleep. Visualization, again, a sort of component of mindfulness, which I'll talk a little bit about. The Army has a visualization exercise that they use to help people get to sleep in a battle zone, where you sort of imagine yourself laying in a canoe in the water. So your body is actually below the level of the water, but the canoe is keeping you up out of the water, and you're visualizing what you can see out of the canoe, and you're being aware of the natural movement of the water and slow breathing, and combining that with a bit of muscle relaxation can help us fall asleep. And I've included driving the bed there. When we ran through our little pre-run of this, that came up. I'm not quite entirely sure what the true name of driving the bed means, but it's kind of a counterintuitive process of falling asleep. Basically, it hinges on the premise that when we're driving for long periods of time and we're focusing on one task on the road, concentrating on driving, that actually starts to overwhelm us with this sense of sleepiness or tiredness. And unfortunately, that's how some people end up in car accidents. But if we apply the same principles to bed, and we're laying in bed and we focus on maybe a visualization exercise, or focus on trying to stay awake, that process actually makes us more tired and helps us fall asleep in the long run. So it's a counterintuitive process of trying to stay awake equals falling asleep. But all of these suggestions, these sleep techniques that I've come up with, I've run through here, are probably best used when consulting with a person like a psychologist as well, who can help you run through some aspects of sleep hygiene, who can work with a GP to make sure that we're not dealing with a medical condition that's impacting sleep, and then give really thorough explanations and understandings on how to do each of these exercises. But if they are things that interest you right now, again, you can just jump on Google, type in some sleep techniques, type in progressive muscle relaxation. You'll find a whole lot of resources. Find one that works for you and use that. So I'll transition a little bit here to talking about mindfulness and dedicate the last few slides to mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Well, it's the process of being fully engaged and present in the moment, being aware of our thoughts, feelings, sensations, and the environment, and how they all interact with our body and how we are in that moment. The whole basis is that, that no feeling or thought is ever good or bad or right or wrong in any given moment. They are just what they are, and by recognizing or acknowledging the thought as it comes, we can be more aware of ourselves in a moment. So we assess each thought and feeling as they pass through our mind. We look at them without judgment, and we just let them go. Thoughts are ever present, they're always in our mind, and it takes a long time to develop the skills to be able to fully clear our mind. But mindfulness, encourages recognizing a thought for just being a thought and letting it go without hanging on to it. If our thoughts end up drifting, we bring ourselves back to the moment by a type of grounding exercise, or becoming focused again on our breathing through our mindfulness process, without anger or irritation or frustration. It happened, that's okay, we'll just come back to the moment and continue with what we were doing, either our body scanning, our progressive muscle relaxation, or our type of breathing exercise that we were doing. Now, while mindfulness does seem a lot like meditation, it's not considered to be meditating, and it doesn't have either a spiritual or religious component with it, but a lot of people do like to pair them together, because it is about connecting to self, connecting to environment, and I suppose it's not a stretch to say connecting to something bigger around us and our place in that. For this purpose of what we're talking about, mindfulness is just simply being present. Now, how do we apply the principles of mindfulness to sleep? Basically, mindfulness is a way that we can reduce our negative emotions like anger, anxiety, depression, stress, and help us become relaxed and focused on a task. Now, that task might be falling asleep, but the added benefit of being relaxed when we're laying in bed, trying to wind down from the day, turn the brain off, and just get to a place where we can just close our eyes and drift off, mindfulness can play a really big role in that. but it can also help us become aware of our surroundings and help us immerse ourselves in a moment. So if we're, on a once in a lifetime experience, if we're sort of really taking in what's going on around us and connecting with all and looking at all those thoughts without thinking about, what we've got to cook when we get home for dinner, or the job that we've needed to get done for work, those things are distracting us from being present in that moment that we might miss out on. Mindfulness is also really handy to help us break unhelpful thinking styles and challenge the way that we are feeling in a kind and compassionate way. If we find that we're starting to catastrophize, or we've found ourselves in a bit of a funk, in a negative mood state, mindfulness can help us reconnect with what's going on around us, and can help us refocus on our task, remember that we're having an unhelpful thought, and that feeling that's attached to it is not going to last forever. And if we just we call it what it is, it's just a thought, it's just a feeling, it's not defining what's going on around us at the moment, and we just let it go, we can refocus and refresh ourselves. Mindfulness can also help us take a break from a busy day and have a quick mindful moment to recharge. Maybe on our break, we spend the last 5 minutes of our break just finding a quiet place, sitting, feeling what's going on in our body, assessing what's going on around us, and using that opportunity to recharge. Mindfulness in that sense can help us increase our compassion, our ability to self-regulate our emotions. It can help us spur some creativity. It can build self-esteem, and for that, it's quite useful. And as I mentioned before, practicing mindfulness in bed can really help us focus on the task at hand, which is sleep. It comes with the added benefit of helping us relax and unwind and be still. So how do we practice mindfulness? Well, it can be done anywhere. You can be standing, sitting, laying down. Finding a place and a position that you're comfortable in to stay there for a period of time is basically the key. The concept is that we pay attention to our breathing, we start counting our breaths, we start focusing on the in and out, and then we turn our mind and our analysis inside, noticing what our body is doing, engaging our senses. What can we feel? What can we hear? What can we taste, smell? And then recognize that the thoughts and feelings that are coming through are quite fleeting, and that they're not going to hang around forever, and that something can come into our mind, and then we can notice that and then let it go. And if we have drifted and we find ourselves thinking about work or something that we need to do, we can just pause that, come back to our breath, in, out, flow, and become refocused on the task. Now, it can be really done anywhere. It's a rough and ready thing that we can do, and especially the more we get better at it, we can get to a mindful state a lot quicker. But basically, the principles are becoming relaxed, taking on what's going on around us, both in and outside the body, and using our breath to really ground ourselves in the moment, and notice that all of our sensations connect us to what's going on. Some examples of mindfulness could be mindful walking or eating exercise. Mindful walking could be just finding a place where you can pace out, between 5 and 10 steps. Really slowly walking, keeping our hands wherever they're comfortable, beside us, crossed in our pockets, however, and taking a step. Notice how our muscles lean our body forward as we start moving. We can feel the effect of gravity as we need to put our foot out in front of us. As our foot hits the ground, we can feel the resistance of the ground below us. We can feel our foot in our shoe. Is our foot hot? Is it cold? We can feel the different muscles that are used as we walk up as we take that step, moving up our leg. We can pay attention to the way that we're balanced. And then as we shift further forward, we transition to the other side, and we do the same thing again. We place our foot on the ground, we feel the texture of the ground, we feel the resistance in the ground, and we keep that process going. We take our steps to the end. It could take us 30 seconds or more to get those 10 paces to the end. And then we turn around slowly and we walk back, and we're taking in every moment of such a simple exercise like walking. The same can be done with eating. Quite a popular one is using like a sultana or a raisin, putting that in your mouth, noticing how the smell of the raisin influences the taste. What's the texture like on our tongue? Do we notice that the sweetness is there, which makes us start salivating? As we roll the raisin or sultana around in our mouth, can we feel it move and engage different parts of our tongue? When we take that first bite, does it pop? Does it smush? What's the taste happening? What taste is occurring then? This is a way of breaking down a really, really simple task like eating a raisin. Instead of just putting a handful in our mouth, we're taking one and we're really, really breaking down what it is to eat a raisin. We can be quite mindful in almost every exercise that we do, and it really just involves us paying attention to what's going on around us or inside of us with our senses, and honing in on that stuff and focusing more and more on that until we're blocking out the outside world. So how do we practice mindfulness? I've just covered a few examples of ways to do it. It is quite personal, just sort of like meditation. Funnily enough, if someone asked me to meditate, I would say no, I can't do it, hate trying to be still and focus and do those things. But I don't mind doing a bit of a mindfulness exercise where I can connect to what's around me. I can do a mindful eating exercise quite well. Some people use chocolate as well, which would be a favorite for other people compared to a raisin. Taking a block of chocolate, smelling it, putting it in your mouth, notice how it starts to melt. Feel the creaminess as it starts to melt and move around. Take a bite on it, it's nice and soft. It becomes more mushy. You can really break down anything. Mindful eating is a great way to get us to slow down at dinner time as well, rather than just shoveling food into our mouth and getting ready to rinse the plates up. Just spending a lot of time. We've taken a lot of time and effort to prepare what we've cooked. Let's really get in touch with it and enjoy it. Another way to practice mindfulness in a really quick way to do it is through a grounding exercise. Again, a quick and rough way to catch ourselves when we're starting to escalate or start to feel a little bit out of control. It involves engaging all of our senses, but one at a time, and to be present in the moment. And we just go through our 5 senses that we have, and we list 5 things that we can see, 4 we can touch, 3 we can hear, 2 we can smell, 1 we can taste, but we do it slowly. It also helps to speak these things out loud if you're not afraid of looking like you're talking to yourself, but you could find a quiet place and where there's no one else around and say, you know, I can see the table, I can see my drink bottle out the window, I can see some leaves, I can touch the desk, I've got like a leather thing here in front of my keyboard, I can feel the denim on my jeans. You know, what can I hear? I can hear a bird, I can hear something going on out behind the door, I can smell nothing, maybe the aircon's going, and then one can I taste? Well, I had lunch, you know, I ate sweet chili sauce, so, and there's been a chili seed that's been giving me curry this whole time. So these are things that we can do to ground ourselves in a moment. And it's definitely, this is something that I do before I do any type of presenting, where I just really connect with what I'm here to do and what I'm doing. It helps me get over some of those nerves and anxieties that sort of overcome anyone before any type of public speaking. But grounding ourselves in a moment can be a really good way to connect with our task and get out of our head and more into our body and what's around us. So mindfulness can be used to move out or withdraw. It depends on what we need to achieve through that mindful moment. Again, it's something that we need to practice to become good at. There's ways that we're going to relate to more than others. And again, it's one of those things that we can jump on Google, type in how to practice mindfulness, and then go from there. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for being here. I hope I've stuck to the time, and yeah, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I've learned a lot of things, but I've also learned that I really want some chocolate now. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat pane below. We'll quickly hand it over to Sandra, who will give us a rundown on the new insomnia pathway that has a lot of tips and resources that are very useful.
Thanks so much, Hannah, and thank you, Matthew, for that excellent presentation. Hannah, can I just confirm that you can see the health pathways screen? Fantastic.
I can.
So that's the login details. For those of you on the Hunter New England side of the border, left-hand side is the login for the Community Health Pathways site, which is password protected, and then the patient info, which is where we house, surprisingly enough, all the patient information, and Central Coast is on the right-hand side. There's no time to talk you through what Health Pathways actually is and some more information about that. So if you are unclear, please contact your PCIO or the PHN and we will come out and have a bit of a chat to you about Health Pathways. I'll just shut that down. So when you go onto the Health Pathways site, hot off the press yesterday is our new insomnia pathway, and just up the top in the search engine you can just type in insomnia. It's the first thing that comes up. And there's the pathway, and it's set out like all our pathways are. There's a little bit of background, and then it's set out assessment, management, referral. And this pathway was written with the sleep specialists at the John Hunter Hospital, so specifically Belinda Souters and Shamila Pratapan informed the pathway and gave it the final sign-off to go live. We went to wider consultation to about 200 people and got some really good feedback that we also added to the pathway. And it also went to the Hunter Drug Information Service and independent GP review before we put it up on the live site. So lots of brains have gone into the development of this pathway, and we hope you'll find it useful. And this is mainly for GPs and practice nurses to use in consultation with patients. So that's the main reason. So for those of you who are listening to this as a patient, I encourage you to go and see your GP to have a chat. So assessment just covers what a normal night's sleep actually is, some things that you would do when you were talking about the history, and I think Matthew has covered a lot of these sorts of things. Assessing patients for what their perpetuating factors might be. And Hannah, can I just confirm, is it big enough for you to see what's written there, or do you want me to make it a bit bigger?
I can read it, but maybe a little bit bigger would be.
A bit bigger, okay. There we go, how's that? And then moving down, just some things you might want to consider when you're doing an examination, particularly to rule out things like big tonsils and sleep apnea and things like that. And then consider if there might be some sort of circadian rhythm disorder going on, which we don't really have time to go into, but there's lots of different ones. Older people tend to have trouble falling asleep early and waking up early. Younger people, our teenagers, fall asleep late, wake up late, and so on. Really important that if you're going to see a doctor or you are a GP assessing patients, that patients keep about a 2-week sleep diary just to see what the deficits are in their sleep, so that will help inform the management of the sleep. If you are referring into public services, they do like you to do an Epworth Sleepiness score and insomnia severity index, and then also about considering patients whether they are fit to drive. You rarely do investigations unless you're ruling out some other conditions. And then management just goes through obviously managing any comorbid or conditions that might be affecting sleep and medication and substance use. As Matthew said, the sleep education is really important, and good sleep hygiene and what actually constitutes a good night's sleep and how to set yourself up for having a good night's sleep. And then, so the main guts of the management section is around the CBTI, which is cognitive behaviour therapy for insomnia. And that's got those 5 elements of good sleep habits, possibly some stimulus control therapy if patients are associating bed with frustration and worry, bedtime restriction therapy, which is for patients who have difficulty falling asleep, some ideas around relaxation that Matthew's gone through very beautifully, and then obviously underpinned by some cognitive therapy for those patients who need it. We've pointed there to some online platforms that you can recommend for some patients for whom that would be suitable, or psychology referral if required. Right down the bottom, and only a consideration for a handful of people for very short-term use would be medication, and we've gone through all the medications, and that very closely aligns with what's on therapeutic guidelines. But obviously they're not nearly as beneficial as the CBTI interventions. And we've also linked to our benzodiazepine withdrawal pathway for patients who are long-term users or problematic users where you need to start withdrawing those. We've put a link through to what evidence there is for complementary medicines. It's by and large quite limited. And then the sorts of things you would consider referring to a sleep specialist for, and that is duplicated down here in the referral section. And then under information, we've got further resources for health professionals and further resources for patients. All of the patient resources have been checked by our patient info team to be readable for an average grade 6 level reading, and they all marry up well with the clinical suggestions that we have in the pathway, so you won't find any conflicting advice there. And everything that we've got there in the for patients section is duplicated on our patient info site. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share our new pathway. I hope you find it useful. And as always, just down here in the corner is the send feedback button. If you've got any feedback at all about things that you think need changing, or things that are wrong, or things that are missing, or just great job health pathways, we'd love to hear that too. Please let us know.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandra. I think I'm sharing my screen now with a big thank you. So a big thank you to Sandra and Matt for presenting today. I'm not sure if there's any questions, Mel. I know we've run a little bit over time, but I just thought I'd check if there are any.
There is a couple that's come in. The first one is, how can sleep problems be best handled in children with no known mental health concerns? Send that one to you, Matthew.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How can sleep problems be best handled in children with no known mental health concerns?
Again, probably something that's worth working alongside a GP with. If our sleep hygiene and our sleep techniques and our routine is all under control and we're doing the best that we possibly can, sleep doesn't necessarily mean mental health problem, but yeah, it's definitely worth investigating those two things together.
And is long-term, is it melatonin for sleep problems? Is that safe? Did I say that right?
I can speak to this if you want, Matthew. Just written some information about melatonin, and my background is that I am a pharmacist. The only studies we have for melatonin are for short duration, so we're not really clear on what the long-term safety is of melatonin. And certainly the prescription only preparation that we've got, I think is only, I mean, it's only recommended for use for a handful of weeks. So we really don't have enough long-term data to speak to the safety beyond a couple of months, probably. Matthew, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, just I guess my own personal experience. When I go overseas for stints to help with jet lag, I take melatonin on the way home to get my jet lag back under control. You can just buy it off the shelf in Canada.
Well, you can actually get melatonin 2 milligram slow release, which is marketed as circadian over the counter in pharmacies now, but they are only marketed for people over 55 with primary insomnia for up to 3 weeks.
Okay, and that's the only 2 questions that have come in so far. If anyone else has any, you can email us at education@thepHN.com.au.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. This is recorded, so it will be available on our People Bank website, and following when you close the link, a short evaluation will pop up. So we appreciate any and all feedback. But thank you again, Matthew and Sandra.
Pleasure.
No problem. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.